Domestic abuse is a silent killer in our African communities. It is especially gender-based violence against women. When I was when I felt led to do a video on domestic abuse, I started thinking, how many instances have I personally encountered, correct? Because I like to draw from experiences I have encountered. It helps me to be more sensitive, and it helps me to come from a place where there's something that I know or I have seen firsthand. That's always very helpful. When I started thinking about it, I thought of two instances. That's too many. However, I felt like, okay, two. I kept thinking about it, and of course, I am Ashley Kusianga. Welcome to Tea, and let's get into it. Guys, before we get into this video, I want to implore you. I wanted I didn't want to make this about, always so like getting people to subscribe and things like that. However, I feel like these are messages, these are conversations that we need to spread the word. We need to share. We need to get talking about these things on a very serious level, because a lot of these things are so ingrained in our African culture that we have to start dismantling them by having open, honest conversations. So whenever you watch a video, if you're watching this video, if it makes you think about somebody, share it with them. If it probes you, to question, subscribe and share it and let people know, and let's have these conversations. That's the point of this, the exposure, so that we can have these conversations and start taking down some of these things that are holding us hostage, that are making us to spread hurt from generation to generation. And I promise I will do my best to keep providing authentic, real conversations so that we can really get to the root of these things that are holding us hostage in our African communities, because there is so much potential in us. I just wanted to put that out there. Please share, please subscribe. Let me know your experiences in the comment. Let me know if there are things that you want me to talk about where it can really help us as a community, because this is really what we're here for. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you so very much for taking the time to be here, listening to this, engaging. I don't take you for granted. Thank you so much. Okay. I said initially, I thought about two instances of domestic abuse that I had personally witnessed, correct? That is incorrect. The more I thought about it, I thought about four instances, thought about six, thought about, and the number kept rising. That is too many, and this was in the span of this was by the time I turned 12. This doesn't make any sense that we should be this exposed and we should be this okay with this violence all around us. We need to do better. We need to address this situation, because this is very detrimental to especially women in our African women in our communities. The first instance I experienced, if you remember, I grew up with my grandparents. So in our home we had two sections. We let out the other section because we weren't using it. It was just three of us in the house. I was really young at this time. We had this family living in that house, and at night you will hear the screaming, you will hear the hitting, the kids running scared whenever dad comes back from work, comes back drunk, or it's always the alcohol. It's, anyways, yes. So this particular night, I don't know what happened. We were sleeping. We kept hearing the screaming, the shouting. My grandmother, she got up, opened the door, and she started walking to the other section. I think she told me to go back. But like I said, when you see my grandmother, you see me, I went with her because I was like, why are you going by yourself, you know? In my own little head, I was like, maybe I'll protect you if something happens. So innocent. So she went there, the door was open, so she went in. The man had something in his hand that he was beating on the woman with. So my grandmother, in trying to separate them and trying to like get the woman away from him so he doesn't keep hitting her and she doesn't keep, he hit her with what he was holding in his hand was a bamboo chair. He hit her with it. Like the next day, her eye was, it was on her eye. It was swollen and it was bruised. I think shortly after that, they moved out and they went found another place to stay. In this instance, according to the man, my grandmother had no right to interfere with his discipline of his wife. She had no right to try to, basically, she was getting in the middle of it. I think it was on this day that I was like, this woman is my hero. Because, and a lot, the way our culture is set up, the way our laws are set up, it will always take his side because literally it's almost like he can do whatever because it's his wife. Even if it entails beating her to death, that's not right. That shouldn't be a culture that we should celebrate. That shouldn't be something about a culture that we should celebrate. That should be something we admonish. That should be something we fight against. There was no apology to my grandmother that I remember where it was like, oh, it was like you put yourself in the situation, so you got what you deserved. That just blows my mind. When I was preparing for this, I realized I was getting so emotional because this is something sad in our community that we keep letting it slide. We just keep think. I don't know if we think that if we don't talk about it, it will magically disappear, or we've just gotten immune to how horrible these acts are. Another instance I recall, there was this man. Honestly, when people would describe him, they'll say, "Oh, that man who beats his wife." That's how people recognize that person. He used to drink a lot. I remember too. And you know, in the community, everybody talks and everybody knows like those little things that are going on in the houses and stuff like that, especially if you make it public. He dragged his wife on the street, beating on her, um, supported her on an electric pole, and was just beating on her mercilessly. What that showed me was he's trying to show, oh, I'm the boss. He's trying to show everybody around. I discipline my wife. She, whenever she steps, like, that is so wrong. Because a lot of people take excerpts from the Bible and they're like, oh, you're supposed to correct. The command, you're supposed to correct your wife or whatever. The commandment is to love your wife. Honestly, love your wife. honor your husband. If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe I am. That is what it is. A lot of women, especially, are dying, are being beaten to death, are having miscarriages because they are being beaten by their husbands while they are pregnant. A lot of women are beaten, shamed, and blamed. Some will say, "Oh, it's your fault. Why did you run your mouth at your husband? Why did you talk back? You hurt his ego. So you have to take whatever comes." Listen, let's get this straight. I am not saying for a woman to be disrespectful to her husband, partner, or whatever. I am saying that a hurt ego does not equate a death sentence. No, let's get that correct. You don't you don't beat someone to a point like no, to a point of where their swollen eyes are all red, like they have bruises all over. That is wrong. That is so wrong. Boyfriends beating your girlfriends. I'm sorry, what? Why? Because what happens is we we see what is modeled before us typically. If you grow up in a violent home, you tend to replicate that if you're not intentional and conscious of the fact that these are definite things that I do not want to portray in my home. Where we work to recognize and acknowledge these things that happened while we were growing up so that we can consciously and intentionally work on avoiding creating those same patterns for ourselves and our family. You want to say, "Oh, I have anger issues, so do not provoke me." Whose responsibility are your actions? I would think our actions are our responsibility. You cannot control anything outside of you but for how you react and but for how you what you decide to do. So maybe those words cut you. However, you took your hand and you smacked that person right up in the face. You beat that person with whatever you could find. No, that's wrong. That is unacceptable. And we as a people, as we as Africans have to come together and start talking and going against these norms because it is not correct. Domestic violence. It's violent or aggressive behavior within the home, typically involving the violent abuse of a spouse or partner. It is willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, any other type of abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one partner against the other. It is not something that we should just let go. It is not something because typically we say, "Oh, that's a strong woman. She has been through so much." No, no, that is not something to be celebrated. We are so glad for her strength, but she shouldn't need that strength in those type of situations because those situations should be non-existent. We shouldn't have those situations. We should seek wisdom, knowledge, understanding so that we can better react to certain instances that provoke us. Poor behaviors should not be excused on either side. However, I am really talking about this today because this is something that is so grave, and it's not exclusive to just happening in Africa. It happens everywhere in our communities. That is wrong. That is unacceptable. We should not be condoning these things. You might say, "Oh, I'm not condoning it," but you're not speaking against it. You're saying silent. And in your silence, we let people going about acting a fool and just like acting like it's normal. Whenever you as a mother, you as a father, you see your child, let me say, like as a boyfriend, beating on his girlfriend, do you sit that child down and tell that child that this should never happen again? You don't do that. So, or do you sit there and say, "Oh, it's good. You taught her a lesson, so she will not repeat that." You as a mother, you as a father, before your child gets married, do you tell your child these are things that you shouldn't do to a spouse? Do you teach them what is expected of them as a husband? Even from a young age, we don't have to wait until they get married. Do we teach our boys how to take care of their wives? I am particularly speaking on instances I have experienced and what is more dominant. I know some people will say women are also perpetrators of domestic violence, and I do not take that away. Do we talk to our children? Do we tell them how they're supposed to behave? What is expected of them when they do we model those things for them so that when they grow up they know what it is they're supposed to be doing? That is our God-given responsibility to bring up children that fear God, children that do His will, children that follow His command. So before we want to start talking about X, Y, and Z's child who is doing this and that, what about our own children? What are we doing to prepare them to be so that when they meet and interact with other people in the world, they can show up as the best versions of themselves? A woman will tell another person, or we see a woman being beaten in public like that and stuff, and people will tell her, "Oh, sorry, just pray, hey, God will change his heart." We need to be very careful. God cannot change the heart of someone that doesn't want their heart to be changed. That is the first thing. So if we are not even acknowledging that this is a problem, then we are the problem. We're the ones causing these things for us not to get healed, for it to keep passing down from generation to generation. Hostility, anger, hurt. These are things where if we take the time as a people to hold each other accountable, to speak up against these things that are blatantly wrong, we will be so much better for it. So, no, it is not the woman's job. It is not solely her job to pray for her husband's heart to be changed. She can, but the husband has to know and has to want to change. And first of all, we should not even be letting it get to that level. That's the worst case scenario. We're supposed to be responsible as parents. We're supposed to be responsible as adults in ourselves before even making a commitment to want to get into a relationship, a partnership with another person where we know what it is that is expected of us and how it is we're supposed to treat these people, our spouses, our children that we eventually bring into the world. I, I this is such a crucial, severe topic. This is something where we have normalized. We have normalized, or we just see it and it just looks normal because it happens so often. It's not that big of a deal. It is a huge deal. It is a ginormous deal. This should not be happening. This should not be allowed. Friends, if you know your friend is beating on his wife and stuff like that, that is unacceptable. And you should point that out. We need to be holding each other accountable. If you know your friend is running her mouth and being rude and disrespectful, hold her accountable. Tell her, we, I'm not saying butt into people's business, but we're supposed to be each other's brother and sister's keeper. That's the beauty of our African culture, our sense of community. It shouldn't just be community when there's something good to celebrate. It should be community when there's something good to celebrate. It should be community when there's something to teach. It should be community when there's something sad to condone over. It should be community all the time, whenever we're supporting each other, being there for each other, and that means in every aspect of it. That is what makes us Africans unique. I am so sad by this that happens in our African community. And there's a lot of us that are hurting. That you've probably been a victim. I was looking at some research and things like that. 1 in 3 African women attest to have endured domestic violence. Is that not crazy? Is that not insane? Like, it's so normal. 1 in 3. I don't know how true that data is, but my goodness. Wow. I dare you that every person knows of somebody, every African knows of somebody or has heard of an instance of somebody that has suffered domestic abuse. Is that normal? Come on, guys. Like, seriously. Is that okay? Is that okay? Is it okay that God should create his being? He creates something so beautiful and wonderful, and you take it and want to be the author of it. You want to be the ruler of it. You want to show your might. We should love each other. We should respect each other. We're not perfect. We're going to fall short, but we should extend each other grace in those instances. We should communicate our hurt. We should learn to be sensitive enough to understand that if I wouldn't want this done to me, then I shouldn't do it to someone else. Guys, we need to speak up. Family, we need to speak up. Friends, we need to speak up. We need to hold each other accountable. There is reckless loss of life, and it doesn't just mean like actual death. Some people never come out of those emotional traumas and their lives just go to waste because they've been so hurt, and then they just go about hurting other people, and it's just a repeated cycle, affecting your kids affecting their own kids. And we can do better. We really can. We need to. We need to do better. Thank you so much for listening to me, for participating in this conversation with me. I look forward to your comments, to anything you have to share about this. I hope this resonated with you. And I pray that if you have been a victim of domestic violence. I pray you heal. I pray you know you are not alone. I pray your support system comes through for you. But overall, you have the ultimate support system, our God, and He's got you always. May you know that it is not the end for you. I love you so much for taking the time, for being here, listening to me. I will see you on our next episode 1 week from today. Thank you.